Hi guys, so we are continuing with contract law in a second part, and we're looking at the additional three elements. So obviously we have reviewed offer, acceptance, consideration. Now we're looking at capacity, legality, and intent to create legal relations. So when we're talking about capacity, we're really saying this is the ability, the capability or fitness to do something, a legal right, power, or competency to perform some act, an ability to comprehend both the nature and consequences of one's acts. So we're basically saying that capacity relates to soundness of mind and to the intelligent understanding and perception of one's action. It is the power either to create or to enter into a legal relation under the same conditions or circumstances as a person of sound mind or normal intelligence with the power to create or to enter. So a person's normal intelligence and sound mind has the capacity to dispose of his or her property by will as she sees fit. So when we're looking at capacity, is the person in their right mind? Do they have the capacity to, and they know exactly what they're doing when going into or entering into a legally binding contract? The next element we're looking at is, legality. And what we're basically saying with legality is it legal? So is the contract that you're going or entering into, is it legal? So if I was selling drugs to someone and then they didn't pay me for those drugs, I can't actually take these people to court saying that I'd sold these people an illegal substance, a drug, and they hadn't paid me. Therefore, they were in breach of contract because it's not legal, and therefore, you cannot enter into a contract which is not legally binding. Now, when we look at the last element, intention to create legal relations, we can see this with the case versus Blue versus Ashley in 2017. And with Blue versus Ashley 2017, Mr. Ashley was the chairman of Sports Direct, and Mr. Blue was contracted to work for Mr. Ashley. And then in a social event in a pub with three other representatives, present at that pub, and during that time period they had over 8 pints, and Mr. Ashley had agreed to give Mr. Blue £15 million if Mr. Blue had achieved a share price of £8. And subsequently, the share price of Sports Direct, went to £8. And then Mr. Blue asked Mr. Ashley for the £15 million, which he, had said that he had legally entered into a contractual relation if he had actually achieved the £8 for £15 million. So this went to court because obviously Mr. Ashley didn't want to pay the £15 million to Mr. Blue. And given the judgment by Mr. Justice Leggett, who dismissed Mr. Blue's claim on the grounds that the party had not intended that Mr. Ashley would be legally bound by his rather extravagant promise to Mr. Blue. So the judge made a number of observations, the main being that it was the evening and it was drinking in a pub and it was unlikely to be the setting for a formal contractual negotiations. Further to this, it wasn't really within Mr. Blue's power to actually achieve the share price of £8. So, the conclusion was that this was thrown out and Mr. Blue wasn't entitled because there was no intention to enter into a legally binding contract. But even if you think about intention to create legal relations and you kind of borrow some money from a friend, so are you actually intending to go into a contractual in terms of legally binding intentions? And you need to set it out properly. Otherwise, even if you lend someone money and you don't have the proper contract, either verbally or in writing, to state that the date, the time, what the details were, the payment methods, how much is going to be paid back over what period of time, if there's going to be any interest, and so on and so forth. Unless you put all these details in within a contract, then you may not be entering into a legally binding contract. So you may not be able to get your money back from someone if you've lent it to someone unless you've stipulated all these points demonstrating your intention to enter into a legally binding contract where you expect those monies to be repaid. So don't dismiss this element of intention to create legal relations. But sometimes, again, as I stated in the beginning, that you normally see offer, acceptance, consideration, capacity, and then legality and intent to create legal relations together. So you normally see 5 elements. But I, again, as I stated before, like to see this split into 6 elements in terms of offer, acceptance, consideration, capacity, legality, and intent to create legal relations. So I hope that has helped today from Mr. Tan.